Hello, and welcome to another episode of the podcast that brings you all the high-voltage, intriguing information from the nooks and crannies of the intellectual armchair, as well as electrifying conversation on all topics current, past, and yet to be. This is Phase to Phase.
A distinctly human error.
Signal is stable. This frequency will continue to remain open. Am I
feeling I've been left behind? Feeling I've been left behind.
Am I?
Here are your hosts, Marcus and Drew.
Welcome back, guys. It's been a while.
Hey, everybody.
Who are you?
Hey. Hi.
Who?
Hi, Marcus.
Get out of my house.
No.
Oh.
I live here.
Oh, this is your house.
This is my house.
Oh, okay. We're in a different environment.
But you can hang out here, though.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you seem like a pretty upstanding guy.
You don't know me at all.
Hi, everybody. Freaking, that was a long break we took there, but we're just kind of regrouping, getting our base together, reorganizing.
We were updating to 2.0.
Indeed, to bring you better, faster podcasts with more connections to the interwebs.
Speaking of 2.0, Drew, what are we going to talk about today?
Indeed. Today we're going to be kind of doing a retake.
Anniversary?
Yes, exactly. MK Ultra 2. Winter Soldier, I guess. Pig in the Big City.
Working title.
Yeah, because like I was saying before, it's MK Ultra is so overarching and so ginormous, and mind control in general. My God, there were so many players and programs that we couldn't have gotten into.
Never.
Yeah, never. Like you could literally have an entire podcast that's just MK Ultra themed, and you could have several seasons just on it.
Yeah.
So, but today we're not going to be talking about certain things because I want to kind of discuss only, again, like the first one, I only want to discuss certain things that are basically on the books that are provable.
Right. Good idea.
Because of that, we're going to be skipping certain things like 5G technology, satanic ritual abuse, which is really big in the 90s. It's big in the 90s. ELF and ULF waves, Hollywood mind control, and or gang stalking. But before we begin, I obviously do like I do. I want to go through kind of what the point of everything is, and then maybe hit up some terms and a little bit of history. Marcus, what did you think about hypnosis and mind control before our first episode?
Yeah,
all those year ago.
Well, discounting its appearances in adult films.
Adult
I'm just
films?
kidding. Oh, you're not well. Let me inform you, sir. Anyway, not much, to be honest. I thought it was a bunch of hooey.
That's malarkey for those of you that don't understand. and malarkey is also slang for bullshit.
Let me say it this way. When I was younger, I thought it was a bunch of hooey nonsense. Then I got into meditation, and then I thought about it a little more of like, well, there might be some merit, actually. And, I've heard of things through the osmosis of pop culture.
Totally.
Certainly of mind control and Manchurian candidates and that sort of all the like.
Hollywood and pop culture has really popularized that. What did you think about it after the episode?
After, I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, me too.
Not only is it real, but it's been funded.
And it's a long time ago, too, kind of a thing.
Yeah, it's got a long history.
The stuff that we know is like, that's literally a half a century old.
Right.
Which is terrifying in and of its own. I agree. I also thought it was kind of a bunch of nonsense and just a bunch of pop culture. I thought that the brain was way too complicated for human beings to be able to kind of like gauge it.
You would hope.
Game it or whatever.
Yeah.
And then the revelations of MK Ultra and other stuff kind of shattered that.
And I should also say, the more I learned about psychology and stuff.
Yes, no kidding.
Yeah.
Yes, which we're going to be talking about an awful lot today. So why would mind control be so important, Marcus? Like, why do you think the federal government, along with probably a whole bunch of other private organizations and corporations and such, funded something like this through so much time and resources? Because like we're going to go into, there was like hundreds of sub-projects under MK Ultra, or at least 120.
Well, it started, as far as we know, as like a military thing, like a defense thing, like we said, the psychological arms race.
We're going to go into that too, for the history, just to kind of bring everybody up to speed.
Yeah. And then I think kind of some other people, some nefarious people, kind of were like, wait a minute, we can do this to our own citizens.
Right.
For various reasons.
Right. Whatever the hell I desire.
Yeah. whether that's to influence public opinion or to sort of control people and keep them from...
Whether on like an individual level or like a mass level.
Yeah.
Which again, this is exactly what we're going to be talking about today. I've broken everything up into 2 parts. One for like personal methods and techniques or whatever for controlling an individual. And the second for like a large scale kind of social application.
Nice.
So yeah, obviously you would want somebody who is completely mind controlled because for one thing, you'd have no regrets and no remorse. You know what I mean? When you have them carry out whatever duty they've done, they have no memory of the thing. If you can compartmentalize it, you know what I mean? As well as
on their own volition.
Yeah, exactly. In addition, their denial would be super like passionate,
ironclad,
and undeniable. Yeah, because they would,
they didn't think they did it.
You could put them through any test that we have, dude, and they would pass it. So
right.
As well as, safeguarding vital information. There's no way that these people are going to give everything up because especially if you don't even know that, if you don't know what you don't know, you know what I mean? You don't know that there's like a section in your brain that holds this knowledge. And so if somebody's torturing the crap out of you, it's going to do them no good because to you have no information. And these people that are hurting you are just, wrong. And there's tons of other attributes that we're going to be, kind of going over here, such as like strength and stamina. I mean, you can condition somebody to kind of push themselves beyond what their normal will, what their conscious will, can take. Of course, smuggling is always going to be great because, if they don't know that they're carrying something like information or drugs or whatever, then, they can lie to get through the border.
Right.
And of course, good old blackmail. You can use people like spies use the honeypot, where they like, you're not familiar with this term, Marcus?
She honeypotted me.
Right. Where you can kind of, force people into kind of precarious situations, salacious situations and, compromising situations where you take pictures of them and whatever and get them to do whatever you want.
No, see, he put his dick in my mouth.
So it's totally fine. So in the next section, we're going to be going over terms just to kind of familiarize everybody with some of this information here. And our first word is going to be subliminal messaging, which is probably the most subtle and well-known trick of the mind control, in the mind control wheelhouse. What is that, Marcus? I'm sure you've heard that before.
Yvonne Etniage.
Yes, exactly. Join the Navy.
Liminal, subliminal, and superliminal.
Hey, you, join the Navy. All right.
Okay.
It's a technique usually used by marketing and other media to influence people without without them being aware of it or the message itself. And this may involve the use of like split-second flashes or texts, hidden images, or like subtle cues that kind of like affect the audience at like a level way below the conscious awareness level. Like back in the day when we'd go to see them moving pictures down in the movie theater, they would have like subliminal advertisement to try to get you like, you remember like, let's go out to the lobby, and then like a Coke symbol would like flash hella quick or something like that.
For like 2 frames.
Yeah, exactly. And buy ourselves some crack. And so that was kind of like the first, usage, at least in the marketing realm in history. So the next on the list is a handler, which is just like a manager of any subject, basically. Q, not the guy from...
I was going to say, the guy from 007?
No. And
he's the guy who gives you the weapons.
Not him either. Oh. And also not the intergalactic space wizard guy from the original Star Trek. Sorry. Next Generation.
Yeah.
How dare you? So, a cue is just a command. Subjects receive cues to do whatever, which is slightly different than a trigger. So a trigger is kind of any word that inspires...
Wait, 2019? Oh.
No, exactly.
Okay.
Sorry. See, this is hard now.
You don't want to trigger somebody.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This
is why we define the terms.
Right. They're also called keys in some circles of the internet. So it's theoretically like any kind of stimulus that can be utilized like as a trigger. So, for instance... when victims get like electroshock therapy, the electric shock is the initial temporary trigger.
Mm-hmm.
So next is an alter or a multiple, which is just a change or a cause to change in character or composition, which is typically small, but in like a very, very significant way. Kind of like what
when you suddenly speak Vietnamese.
Candidate. Yeah.
Oh,
exactly.
okay.
Yeah, no, that'll happen too. Like, I mean, I haven't like seen that, but I'm sure it's somewhere. Next term on the list is Stockholm Syndrome.
Oh.
I'm sure you know what this one is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is a condition which causes hostages to develop like a psychological alliance like with their captors during the incident, during the captivity.
My last relationship.
Mine too. But I was on the bad end. So next on the list is psychological warfare, or a psyop. This is a term that's been used a bunch too, and especially the conspiracy community. And that's like the use of like propaganda, threats, or like psychological techniques to like mislead and to demoralize, or just to otherwise influence like the thinking and behavior of your enemy. So last on the list is social engineering. We kind of briefly talked about this in our first one or whatever, Marcus, but basically it's a discipline in social science that like kind of refers to the efforts to influence particular attitudes and social behaviors, but like on a large scale.
Right.
Whether it's by governments, media, private groups, corporations, in order to produce desired characteristics within the target population. So social engineering can also be understood like philosophically as like a deterministic phenomenon where the intentions and goals of the architects of this like new social construct can be realized. They're cultural creators. They're fad designers. You know what I mean? They get us all like hooked onto like what's cool. And finally, social engineers use psychological methods, but they also use scientific methods to like analyze and understand the social systems, in order to design the appropriate methods to like achieve their desired results of their human subjects. So we're going to do a little brainwashing recap here real quick, just so that we can kind of establish what we know.
Okay.
That way it kind of puts everything into perspective. So, as we discussed kind of briefly before, one could go back as far as like Babylon and Egypt, with the Book of the Dead, using like rituals with form of mind control and potions and drugs, as well as, the ancient methods from the people from India and Pakistan, that whole region, as well as like ancient Aztecs and Mayan who like absolutely used like ritual sacrifice via the priest class to kind of control their subjects or whatever, because they had knowledge, a secret knowledge, occult knowledge of things like the stars or the equinox and all these like things that happen all the time. Like, did you ever see that movie Apocalypto?
I have not actually.
It's really good. I highly recommend watching it. There's a really great scene where it's like basically the main character is like a.
Did they work in a way to attack the Jews?
Yes, because milk. It's real subtle though, so you don't really see it, but it's in there. And because the priest and the subsequently the king have this secret knowledge, specifically in this movie of an eclipse, they're able to be like
to use
Lord
that
so and so keep show us a sign that our king is like righteous and he totally deserves to rule for the rest of his life and is never wrong. And
let's take away this thing that literally makes the
world sun. Yeah, exactly. And then as soon as the freaking like little the eclipse happens, of course all the tens of thousands of people that are at the base of the pyramid that are watching this thing are freaking out.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, it's God, he's blocking out the sun. And, of course, the priest is like laughing and looking back at the king like,
show the villagers what happens if I don't get to sleep with every woman I want.
Exactly, bro.
I'll take the sun away.
For real, dude. And then he's like, okay, well, if we just, keep doing things, bring the sun back. And, of course, it comes back. And he's just like, see, we're the rulers, blah, blah, blah. And anyway, it's just a real good like look into like, wow, that is mind control.
Yeah.
So we also know via our last podcast, about Hans Mesmer and his stupid barrel of iron shavings and stuff, and the power of suggestion, as well as we briefly discussed Lord Bertram Russell and his whole like philosophy of free will and whether or not we have it and we should keep it, or even as recent as World War II with the Nazi concentration camps and the super immoral tests that they were
doing.
Mengele. Yep, exactly, a la Dr. Mengele. Trying to find out, among other things, how to kind of perfect the art of disassociation and mind control. So after World War II, the U.S. Department of Defense secretly like imported, thousands and thousands of Nazi scientists, as well as like spies and such into the U.S. via South America with the help of the Vatican, allegedly. And this, of course, was Operation Paperclip, which we also discussed in our second episode, I believe. And one of the more prominent finds for the U.S., as far as like important people that we wanted like on our team, quote unquote, was a man named General Reinhard Gehlich. So Gehlen was Hitler's chief like intelligence officer. He was like a spy master, and he kind of specialized in Russia. So when the Iron Curtain went up after World War II and everything, he was the guy who knew who the fuck were spies on the other side? You know what I mean? And so obviously his information was invaluable to the United States. And in 45, he came over to DC and met extensively with President Truman, General William Wild Bill Donovan, who was like the director of the Office of Strategic Services, as well as Allen Dulles, who would later become the head of the CIA. So you got all these top intel brasses along with the president talking to this guy who is the only guy who knows what's going on behind the
enemy of my enemy.
It's my friend, exactly. And the objective of their meeting basically was to kind of reorganize the American intelligence operation and like transform it into a super high efficient covert organization. And the accumulation of their efforts basically produced the CIA in 1946. Or 47, rather, excuse me. And in the process, Galen revealed to his new American masters what they, basically what they feared the most, and which is what their common enemy, the Russians, was working on. And that was to develop like a counter-espionage program to completely shut out any information gathered by Western spies, i.e. the Iron Curtain.
Right.
And so in response to this like scare tactic, they basically created this thing called Project Chatter, which was developed in response to the Soviets' apparent like successes that they had like through the uses of like truth serums, truth drugs. This rationale, of course, may have just been like a cover story after MKUltra was exposed to be like, well, we are only doing this because they were
national security. So
the research focused on the identification and like testing of a bunch of drugs in the use of interrogations and recruitment of like agents. And so the CIA kind of decided to expand their effort into the area of behavioral modification. And they opened up different things like Project Bluebird, which then became Project Artichoke, which was all approved by Allen Dulles in the 1950s. And basically their objective was just four little parts. One is to discover a means of conditioning personnel to like prevent the unauthorized extraction of information. 2 was to investigate the possibility of control of an individual by application of specific interrogation techniques. Number 3 is to investigate memory enhancement, which is kind of cool. Number 4 is establish defensive means by preventing hostile control of agency personnel and offensive uses of interrogational techniques, including hypnosis and drugs.
Bum, bum, bum.
So, of course, that spawned Project MKUltra. And that came into existence on April 13th, 1953, along the lines proposed by Richard Helms, Deputy Director of CIA, with the rationale of establishing a special funding mechanism of extreme sensitivity, end quote. So, enter this guy, Dr. Ewan Cameron. You remember this guy, Marcus?
Good chap.
Upstanding gentleman. He was the former head of the Canadian American and World Psychiatric Association. And because of Cameron's extensive experience and credentials, the CIA funneled millions of dollars through this organization, like the Society for Investigating of Human Ecology at Cornell University, which Cameron just ruthlessly presided over. So Cameron was basically famous for conceiving that technique that we talked about before called psychic driving.
Right.
Which was just basically took patients who weren't completely aware of what he was doing, as far as, because they would go in there for, postpartum
my head hurts,
or, exactly, things that are normal, and, have all this crazy testing done on them. Conducting tests on unsuspecting patients that were like kept in drug-induced comas for just weeks. I can't remember how long it was last time, but it was like, I think it was like 80 days or something like that. And, just administered just a regime of heavy doses of LSD and electroshock therapy.
A regime of regimen. That was a joke.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, regime is a total thing.
Hey, wait a minute. Did
I fuck that up again? God damn it. And that's where all those like horrific pictures come from of like, kids in like electroshock helmets and, electrodes strapped to their heads. And we will hear those horror stories of like repetitive auditory messages that were played like literally hundreds of thousands of times while patients were sleeping in his, his sleep rooms or something, which ironically a lot of people didn't get sleep.
Not a lot of sleep was going on there.
Yeah, exactly.
Not a lot of sleep.
Especially when you're up all night fucking blitzed on acid. So, the scope of MKUltra was obviously super broad, 80 different institutions, which I found was super surprising. And a lot of these places, including like colleges and universities, hospitals, prisons, pharmacological companies, in fact, over 150 different individual operations that involved like trauma, drugs, blackmail, things that we talked about before, like Operation Midnight Climax, where they would like, hire
with the prostitutes
and like, have a two-way mirror and get people all dosed up and say weird shit and perform, all kinds of experiments. That way you can, behavioral experiments. That way you can kind of, oh, yeah. And the CIA kind of operated through these institutions and used them as like front organizations. And a lot of them didn't even know that they were even involved in the CIA. You know what I mean? They had no idea. They thought there was just like a subcontract.
That's messed up.
I know, right? You have no idea you're working for
the devil. Yeah.
As we know, the program was officially halted in 1973 after a series of scandals that were brought to light by the very illegal and immoral nature of the program, including the use of U.S. and Canadian citizens as like,
as subjects,
mental guinea pigs. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And people like Frank Olson, we talked about briefly, that biological warfare scientist that was working for the CIA briefly. I was like at like a meeting at his boss's house in Maryland, and they dosed him with a bunch of LSD after dinner in like a cocktail or whatever. Mm-hmm. And he had like a freaking mental breakdown. And like a week later, he asked to be removed, or he was just really adamant.
He wanted out.
Yes, exactly. And they were like, no, don't do that. Like, we're gonna fly you to New York.
We're gonna take real good care of you.
Yeah,
real good care of you.
10-story fucking hotel room window after bonking you on the head. Bonking yourself on the head. Sorry. Worst case of suicide I ever saw. So Project MKUltra was first brought to the public's attention though in 1975 by the Church Committee. Yeah, and investigative efforts were kind of super hampered rather, by the CIA's new director, Richard Helms. He was the one that ordered all the files destroyed in 1973. And so all we have is basically some of the like 20,000 pages or something like that of like some of the receipts with Gottlieb's name.
I want to see the receipts.
Yeah, Gottlieb was the only guy, predominantly
the only person named really
on there. Yeah, they threw him under the bus hard, which again doesn't mean he's a good guy, but
you know what? He didn't come to the Christmas party, so fuck him.
Yeah, that was his fault. He was supposed to bring cookies, and that son of a bitch just always shows up, eats the little wieners that are just so delicious. Those little ones that kind of taste like ketchup but aren't quite ketchup.
Little cock doggies.
Yeah, and then he leaves. And just a little side note that I kind of found out here that I didn't know before is that some surviving information regarding MKUltra was declassified in December of 2018. And some of these documents include a letter to an unidentified doctor discussing work on 6 dogs that they made run, turn, and stop via remote control brain implants. I'm going to be talking about that a little bit more later on. There's a certain doctor I might have had you kind of dip into for a second. And as well as another thing called Subproject 119, and Subproject 119 was basically, quote, recording, analysis and interpretation of bioelectric signals for the human organism and activation of human behavior by remote means.
Well, that first part didn't sound that bad.
Yeah, and then you tacked on the last part, robot control, and then you're like, this is awesome. Okay, so we're all caught up now. So now that we're caught up with mind control's long history, we're going to be talking about trauma-based mind control. One of the many varieties of...
my favorite kind of mind control, really.
Totally. If served cold is really good. So this is referred to as like multiple personality disorder or dissociative identity disorder, I think, to be more specific. It's the most extreme form of mind control, and it's used in combination of heavy hypnosis, torture, drugs, in order to kind of subconsciously forge like a secret mind control slave. And the brain kind of begins to... So the brain is obviously like a super complex organ that can create things that are called amnesia barriers.
Right.
And so kind of around the parts of the brain that house these like super traumatic memories.
That never happened.
Yeah, exactly.
Forget that thing.
It cut it off.
No.
It's like a survival mechanism. And so when things are too painful or too damaging, basically the conscious mind just like separates it, stores it.
File not found.
Yes, exactly. So, and for instance, like a returning veteran may not remember, every part of his or her deployment, or even, someone who survives like a horrific accident will, likely not really remember the entire
Yeah.
ordeal.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe like flashes, bits and pieces. The brain like stores it off, walls it off the trauma, and like a partitioning of like a hard drive.
Oh, that's a good metaphor. Yeah.
So by discovering and subsequently taking advantage of this mechanism within the brain, programmers can basically create complete dissociative parts of the mind that like function independently and are completely like unaware of other parts of the brain. That phenomenon is called dissociation. It's what human beings have been using, I guess, for like a really long time to achieve any kind of extreme goal. So like special force snipers, lying like motionless for days, waiting for the perfect time to like take that perfect shot.
Yeah.
I can't remember what they're called. Fuckers.
What? What'd you call me?
Hindu fuckers. Hindu fuckers. Fuck you. And yogis who like walk completely unfettered across like super red hot coals.
Oh, yeah.
And can totally handle that.
It's like compartmentalizing your brain.
Yes, exactly. To do something that maybe your conscious mind would not allow.
Right.
So most people, as I said, can disassociate to some degree, and only a few people can like fully and completely have disassociated identities. And these are the people that mind control programmers target and look for.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting that you say that, because I've heard, and sort of, I guess you could say experience, not firsthand, but secondhand, that people are more susceptible to hypnosis because of various reasons. Maybe they're more suggestible, or they're just...
There's only a small percentage of, I've heard different numbers, but like around 10% of the population is what hypnosists call highly suggestible.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, now that we discussed trauma-based mind control, I kind of want to discuss one section that we're going to be not 100% being able to back up because,
let's go to the Twilight Zone.
Yeah, there's no direct evidence for this one. It does not exist. But I don't know. It's definitely comfortably in the realm of possibility. And what I'm talking about is Monarch programming.
Okay.
Have you heard of this at all?
No.
I didn't think so. I don't think you're the type of person looking up like mental slave.
I'm not on
techniques
YouTube
and
at 3
shit.
o'clock in the morning,
Exactly.
listening
Right,
to
going
Coast to
down a
Coast
rabbit hole.
AM.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Eddie Bravo told me, bro. All I'm saying is look into it. So MK Ultra was obviously the broad and like preliminary case study of like a wide range of mindfuckery, like the MK 101. And Monarch is basically the evolution of that work.
Mm-hmm.
So taking only the most effective methodology and applying it to create like a true Manchurian candidate. Although like many suspected black budget programs and technologies, its existence, of course, is officially denied by all like U.S. officials.
Right.
So Monarch programming is like the mental ability to overcome fear, pain, fatigue, stress, anything you would want through intense repetition and complete like mental trauma, just breaking an individual's mind. Subjects can be molded and sharpened so that the subject like morphs into something obviously that they weren't before, and this is referred to the Monarch programming. And the reason why it's referred to that
is this like the repatterning stuff that we talked about?
Yes,
that's what it sounds like.
To a very specific degree.
Okay.
So some believe that this ability can be passed genetically from one generation to the next. For instance, like children of multi-generational abuse often kind of already have, unfortunately, like a well-developed ability to kind of disassociate.
Right.
And it's believed that this ability can pass genetically and activate through trauma, like a trigger.
Huh.
It genetically activates a like mental partitioning of your brain. One of the key factors for scientists to theorize that memory is genetic is the phenomenon that occurs with the migration of the monarch butterfly.
Okay, this makes sense. Okay.
Right. So each year the monarch butterfly flies super like from across North America, takes an incredible journey as far, I think it goes all the way up to Canada and all the way down to Mexico.
Yeah.
And it's millions and millions of butterflies, and they descend on a small area of Mexico for the winter for like one season. And then once spring arrives, they begin the long journey back. And the reason why anybody should care about this is because what's amazing is that this feat takes like multiple generations of butterfly.
Right.
It's like a 2,500 mile trip, and no one butterfly makes the return
The
journey.
whole thing.
Yeah, or even like a large part of it. And this has obviously puzzled scientists because of, how in the hell is this butterfly doing this? How does it know where to go? You know what I mean? And they think the answer lies basically in something called epigenetic memory.
Mm-hmm.
And memories that are learned by the parents and then passed on to their offspring.
Yeah, I heard something similar where they had domesticated animals. I don't know if it was rats or something, but they were, they were raised entirely in captivity in like laboratories or whatever, and then they showed them like a picture of a hawk, and they instantly freezed, like they had like this genetic memory.
Chickens do that too, surprisingly.
Yeah,
they would have like a light shining overhead to produce a silhouette or a shadow of any kind of object that you flew over, and they would fly over like a triangle, a circle, a heart, or whatever, different like basic shapes or whatever, and then they'd fly over like a hawk shape or whatever, and that would be the one that would get them all to scatter. And they've, like you said, they've been raised in captivity. They've never seen a hawk. They know what a hawk is, but they know that it's dangerous.
Right.
And frankly, human beings have that too. We just don't listen to it. We have intuition.
Yeah.
All human beings have some sort of innate like fear of like things that have historically hunted human beings, and that's got to be a trauma that, because we call it trauma, but for all we know, that's just like a genetic species-wide learning mechanism. You know what I mean? That makes you go, hey, that.
I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense biologically.
Don't touch that. Yeah, right.
If this thing has hunted us for thousands of years,
the species,
help
you survive, which is the name of the game, right? So, I don't know. I just thought that was interesting. So. And because of this, the monarch butterfly is the international symbol for trauma-based mind control, which I don't know who like officially,
There was a committee.
I was just
we voted on it.
Damn it.
It narrowly passed.
I got a new phone.
I mean, we wanted to do pink elephants, but
okay. I was gonna say I was.
the
I took
monarch
it personally at first, but then I forgot that I got a new phone, so it's not your fault.
Yeah. I mean, the butterfly people they brought cake, so
and it was delicious.
They knew my weakness.
Butterfly cream cake. It's not a real thing, but it does sound good.
It does sound good.
What'd you bring me? Butterfly cream cake? Ooh! It sounds light and fluffy. I imagine it's also because like they go into like a cocoon, I suppose, and then...
The whole metamorphosis thing?
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, that was the word I was looking for. So monarch subjects are uniquely crafted to serve the role that best fits the needs of their often rich and powerful handlers with the very utterance of a trigger word. This word can kind of bring forth like an alter or a multiple, like we were talking earlier, that is kind of created through trauma and repetition and reinforcement. And then after that, the subject is then, ready to receive and carry out any command or cue. And, these roles range from covert military operations and, corporate espionage to politicians, celebrities, athletes, and even prostitution and pornography, like snuff films and really jacked up stuff where you'd want a person. Mind control slaves are expensive and time consuming to create and maintain, but it's done, if it's done correctly, it can basically be the perfect assassin or patsy or soldier or like I said, celebrity A-lister, earning them and their handlers, a handsome amount of money every year,
and clean hands.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. There's no connection. And so legend has it that the most elite and powerful families, internationally tried to exploit this phenomenon within the brain in an attempt to like cultivate this ability in their own children.
Yikes.
And there's a hideous process that
takes
place at a very young age. Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of like the skepticism is that people are doing this just because like the ends justify the means kind of thing. Like, yeah, it's for his own good. Like, yes, it's going to hurt him now, but he'll be a super like math crunching, stock selling titan or whatever. I don't know what the hell these people do. If not born into this madness, testing will take place to determine the ability for the subject to disassociate. So sometimes victims from domestically abused environments will be chosen specifically because of their heightened dissociative abilities. Like I said, there was that percentage of people that are either highly suggestible or they already have the genetic imprint. And the second aspect that must be considered is IQ. So a great deal of intelligence and creativity obviously is required to create these dissociative personalities. And personality tests along with IQ ultimately determine the child's future role. They'll be gauged, for the best possible like slot for them. Once the candidate has been selected, preparation will begin. With multi-generational victims inherent the mental structure required to begin programming, but others, need to be conditioned. And controllers will begin expanding the child's mind as soon as it is born, teaching the child not only to create images, but to associate a smell or sound with memory.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I'm sure that there's people that link this conspiracy also to missing children, and especially if they're minorities.
There is a lot of missing children.
Yeah.
Creativity and intelligence are gently enhanced, and then the child will be taught discipline and training and be able to kind of hold still and keep their eyes open for long periods of time, which will obviously be helpful for whatever they're trying to dump into the kid's mind. And for the first year and a half, roughly, the child is smothered with love in what is known as the love bonding phase.
Okay.
And once a good ability to dissociate as well as a high IQ is reached, programmers will kind of proceed with this next step, which is called shattering the core. That's the psychic driving part, where you keep them up for days and days, and you put them into a coma, and then you begin the reprogramming process.
Did you come across how old these children are supposed to be?
So what I've heard is that from when it first starts, it's super young.
As far as I know, children are kind of most malleable in their first 5 years.
I was just going to say before their first 5.
Yeah.
So yeah, I came up on some really
but I have to wonder. Well, I'm sure, but I have to wonder how effective this sort of thing would be on young children who don't have a firm grasp of language yet. I don't know what the methods are, obviously, but not only that, but even just a grasp of right and wrong. And
yeah, so when they're young like that, they have a very primitive, we would say, understanding of anything.
Right.
And one of the things that I heard that was done is that when the child is still in the crib, they would set up something to be able to snap their hand like a mousetrap, leave it in there, leave the room or whatever. When it snaps its hand and starts crying uncontrollably or whatever, you don't come into the room until it stops crying on its own, and then you can take it off and then smother it with love to reinforce, if the mother comes in and
trust mother and mother is good. And
yeah, exactly. Or whoever the handler is or whatever. But yeah, exactly. So out of just with very, very primitive means of okay, are you crying?
That is something a baby would understand. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. At least theoretically. In direct contrast to the love and affection that the child had received thus far, here that they're not going to receive any. They'll be alone. They'll be tortured. They'll be abused. Loud noises and various smells, anything to kind of overwhelm the brain's sensory input. And after a time, the primary programmer or the handler, who has thus far shown only love and kindness, they arrive, they make themselves present or whatever, and the victim is just oh, this is great, it's a welcome sight. It appears to them that help has arrived, yeah. But this is at this time is when basically the programmers just totally brutalize and traumatize them, and this shocks the mind so crazy. This person who was your caregiver and your mother or God or whatever, whatever the brain, however it associates it, and it basically just completely shatters, and it brain
you have nothing to hold on to.
Yeah, it just can't reconcile these two extreme opposing behaviors from the same person, and so a cognitive dissident is just sets in, and basically
how funny. Also, like my last relationship.
So. I don't know if I ever remember talking to you about this before, but this kind of harkens back to legend of. It might actually be completely proven true or whatever, but I didn't look it up because I just know this is old World War II legend. But that German SS officers, when they first went to when they first went to the
SS
school,
University,
yeah, exactly, right. Just pimply-faced freshmen going in there getting picked on by all the bigger Nazis. Look at this nerd coming in.
My eyes are bluer than yours.
Yeah, right. Look at this. I see a brown part in your hair. It's not even all the way blonde. Get them, fellas. Apparently, they were given a puppy at the beginning of their freshman year.
Ugh.
And yeah, you know where this is going. And
anytime you see a
everything
puppy
was
on the
totally
screen, you
fine,
know how it's going to end.
Lived happily ever after. Yeah. So basically, they're obviously they were told to care for it and to raise it and make it the best. Take it for walks all the time and get it all healthy and burly and probably in their mind they're thinking oh, I want what are you going to get it ready to fight or no. Basically, as a test of their loyalty at the end of the year, they have to drown it or something super super jacked up. And what it basically does is it's a test of loyalty. Will you subvert your own morals for the greater good, I guess, is the point. So, regardless
Definitely
if
one of
that's
those
true or not, that would
conspiracies you
definitely do
hope
it.
is not true.
Yeah, no kidding, right? So once the splitting of the core is successful, the brain can then be fragmented and compartmentalized through future abuse and trauma that's like highly specified. When this happens, the unconscious is left wide open. The victim is
The lizard brain.
dangerously suggestible. Exactly. And disassociation creates an opening to the unconscious. And, what is left is like a childlike persona, basically what you are at like 5 or 6, like what we were talking about earlier.
Right.
The subject is highly hypnotizable and can be told to create new parts within their mind. And the fractured disassociation has no ability to kind of question, what they're being told because,
They don't have a personality.
No, exactly. So with that, there's a kind of, like I was saying earlier, like I mentioned, there's kind of different kinds of monarch alters. The first one is called an alpha, which is just regarded as like a general, the stock model. No rims, no sound system. It's characterized by like extremely pronounced memory and retention, and along with substantially increased speed and stamina and physical strength and like visual acuity, be able to like.
So if this is the
more.
Ford Pinto, then what's the Mercedes?
Well, I can't jump all the way to the Mercedes.
Okay.
I'll go down. I'll go down the list.
Give me like a Hyundai.
Okay. Oh, perfect. Okay. So this is called the beta. This is totally working here. Referred to as
These car metaphors doing anything for you?
all the gearheads are like, yeah.
Go on.
Go on. So the
How much
beta
torque?
is referred to as the sexual programming.
Oh,
which is
Jesus.
funny
That's what
'cause
I
we
was
were just
afraid
talking
you were
about.
going to say.
Yeah. So this training program is usually for women, unfortunately, at least in the Western world as we know it, and actually in the East too, hardcore.
Will there be hot dogs? Oh, I love hot dogs. Oh, the hot dogs that we had last time were very good.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah.
Hey, flying in these hot dogs. How much? $65,000 worth of hot dogs. Oh, man, he loves hot dogs and pizza. It's used to it's basically used to develop the ultimate prostitute. It's the formula for beta programming is the exact same as alpha. The only difference is that through like a series of highly specific tortures and commands, the beta victim retreats deeper into their primitive mind, and as a result, the women kind of end up kind of like childlike, like we told before, as far as their personalities. And so this programming just eliminates all learned moral convictions and stimulates the primitive sexual instinct, devoid of inhibition, emotion, sense of pain. Subjects often self-identify with certain animals, like cats.
I have something, but I'm not even sure if I should share it.
You share with me. You don't have to. We have to keep it on the.
Okay, but I mean that sort of
Have
makes.
you heard of anything like that? Because,
Yeah, that
okay.
sort of makes sense because certain kinks are
Yes.
like that, and those kinks usually are associated with people that have some sort of childhood sexual trauma.
Totally. Well, it's no
Not all the time,
It's no
but-
coincidence that a lot of them disassociate and reassociate with certain animals like
Exactly.
cats or like teddy bears or things that were probably nice and innocent and fluffy and kind that were in the proximity of the victim during the
Yeah, it's a
during the
possibility.
trauma.
Yeah.
So the next car we got up here in the lineup, I guess, would be what's like a step down from a Mercedes.
Step down from a Mercedes,
Like an Acura?
like an Infinity or an Acura.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there we go. Okay. This is called Delta programming, and this is known as the killer programming, originally developed for training of special agents and elite soldiers and covert ops and,
Wait a minute,
Delta Force.
Delta
and Mossad.
Force?
Yeah, exactly. And, and the like. Obviously they want to train them, in becoming fearless, terrorists, basically devoid of, any hesitation, basic self-preservation instincts.
Yep.
Obviously capable of incredible feats of physical strength and endurance.
So in addition to the 10 hours a day of fucking reprogramming, they also have a 6-hour exercise
Workout
regimen.
sesh. Yeah, it's
Jeez.
like the Batman workout session.
Right.
Or the guy from fucking American Psycho, where he's like, I get up in the morning and I do 1,000 crunches. In addition, they also attempt to control and like modulate aggression. And all of these things are optimized, basically, muscle tissue, stamina. And subjects are systematic and robotic in carrying out their assignments.
What's scary is you're telling me all this stuff when I still know the Mercedes-Benz is out there.
Yeah, exactly. This isn't even done, dude. And obviously, these deltas have self-destruction or suicide safeguards built in
Oh,
case
you
they do
have
get
to.
caught. You know what I mean? All right, so now the Mercedes. This is called the THETA programming. So this is the most contentious of the whole contentious like section that we're doing right here, and that's because this one's to be considered the psychic programming, which basically is theta psychic programming is like the exploration of the paranormal phenomenon of like telekinesis, astral projection.
The men who stare at goats.
Exactly, dude. Remote viewing.
I was
like
wondering
future
if we were going to
forecasting.
talk about this stuff.
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
No, this is exactly right, dude. There was literally a group that was trying to like study this, and whether or not they got anything out of it is obviously like up for contention. The movie was really good though.
Yeah.
In addition to the use of various forms of electromagnetic mind control systems, biomedical human telemetry devices, brain implants, basically, directed energy devices like lasers and microwaves, and or electromagnets, and is believed that these are used in like conjunction with super advanced, computers or sophisticated satellite like tracking.
So, may I ask?
Please do, because
With
that's
all
the
this-
end of all this. Like,
Good.
that's
I was
the end
waiting
of
for
the
the end to ask this question.
Totally.
With all this Monarch stuff, I mean, how does any of this information get out? I mean, presumably the only people who would speak about these things are the handlers themselves.
Yes.
So maybe there was somebody who developed a conscience suddenly.
Who was the progenitor of in the mainstream, the conspiracy mainstream of the whole Monarch programming?
Okay.
And that's a lady named Kathy O'Brien. She was the author of a book called Transformation of America.
Transformation.
Yes.
Cool title.
Yes. She was she claims to be like a mind control like courier and like sex slave for like Reagan and Bob Hope and
okay.
like a bunch of like random like people who, I mean, I have no idea or whatever. I mean, shit comes out every fucking day now about like celebrities back in the day and people getting Me Too'd all crazy. But her
And people getting paid off for sleeping with porn stars and stuff.
Hardcore. And so I don't necessarily discount that concept. We're not, like I said, we're not really going to talk about it because even if she's lying or, delusional, then it doesn't discount the mountain of shit that's on record or whatever. You know what I mean? Like her personal account might be a little bit different, but these techniques and methodology, especially the ones that we're going to be going into now, are absolutely 100% provable and you could see it in your everyday life. You know what I mean? All right. So at the beginning, we kind of discussed as like a little cliffhanger some of the secret documents that ended up getting released in 2018 regarding MK Ultra project.
Yeah, I'd like to know more about that.
Would you like to know more? And that was regarding surgical implants. A gentleman named
Jose DelGado.
there he is. Thank you. Yeah, he's a neurosociologist at Yale University, or at least was. And he's also author of the book Evolution of Physical Control of the Brain. It's really a manual if you think about it.
Nighttime reading for me. I mean,
I have it on my crapper.
who would be the best person to make an audiobook of that?
Of this book?
Yeah.
Evolution of... Dude, it'd have to be somebody to be able to keep you awake, dude.
So it wouldn't be like Henry Kissinger?
Evolution of Physical Control of the Brain. Chapter 1.
Ooh, Gilbert Gottfried.
Evolution of the Physical Control of the Brain. That would be fucking awful. It's got to be someone in between.
Somewhere in between Henry Kissinger and Gilbert Gottfried. That's about
Those are the
5
two
billion
fucking
people.
extremes of the spectrum there. It'd have to be someone who has like a central, like Patrick Stewart or Hugo
Oh,
Weaving
okay,
or-
yeah. Someone who's
or
interesting
Sir
to listen
Anthony
to.
Hopkins yeah, exactly. So DelGado is an interesting cat. His research interests just kind of focused around the use of electrical signals and how to evoke responses in the brain. And his earliest work was with cats, coincidentally. But later he did experiments with monkeys and then humans, including psychiatric patients.
The favorite among these types of people.
And much of DelGado's work was within an invention that he called the stemoceiver. So just a fancy word for a remote control for your brain.
Radio-controlled brain implant.
Yeah, radio-controlled like joystick for your brain. And this allowed the subject of the experiment the full freedom of movement while allowing the experimenter to control, the experiment from either like another room or, across the room and this was a great improvement from his earlier equipment, which included like visual disturbances in those whose, wires the brain ran, to big bulky equipment that both, recorded data as well as deliver the desired, electrical charge to the brain.
And he had another one that had to do with chemicals too, right? It was like chemical stimulation. I didn't read too far into it, but I assume it had to do with like dopamine.
Well, that's kind of what he was doing. He was, I guess that's what was happening rather, is because a lot of his subjects would go into these
like euphoria,
or even like horrible fits, where they would be like, "Stop!"
Or drowsiness,
Dude, you can put them to sleep. You can make them happy. You make them cry. You make them.
That sort of stuff sounds really interesting, but you have to dive into how is it actually done. It's
why does it work?
Right. It's like these studies that come out every day. Good Morning America says, "Oh, this new study says that all women like monkeys or something," and you're just like, "Oh, how do you know that?"
Yeah, no kidding, right? Where'd you guys get this so-called study? The stemoceiver could be used to stimulate emotions and control behavior, like we were just saying. And according to DelGado, he said, quote, radio stimulation of different points in the amygdala and the hippocampus, which is the best campus, in the 4 patients produced a variety of effects, including pleasant sensation, elation, deep, thoughtful concentration, odd feelings, super relaxation,
Ooh.
colored visions, and other responses, end quote. So yeah, you could make somebody trip balls or be super sad and anywhere in between, where you won't have to take them out ever, change them every 30,000 thoughts or whatever the thing will be.
Yeah, there was this one quote that I thought was kind of alarming. I believe it was from one of his books where he said, they're changing the concept from know thyself to construct thyself.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Know thyself. Like, okay, well, how about control thyself?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how about we start, even before, instead of just like,
It's like the passive versus an active.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you. You took the words right out of my mouth and actually made them freaking digestible for people to be like, what the hell is this guy saying?
That's one of my many talents.
Moron.
I speak true.
These specific physical reactions, such as like the movement of limbs or the clenching of fists, were achieved when DelGado
or the closing of buttocks.
Cortex. There was a lot of that, I'm sure.
All the men over 50 are like, I want one.
And a human whose implants were stimulated to produce a reaction were unable to resist the reaction. And so one patient said, quote, I guess, doctor, that your electricity is stronger than my will. Nice. Well done, sir. Which is terrifying because that just means that your will is only as strong as like a
one microamp.
Yeah, exactly. Some consider one of DelGado's most promising finds is that of an area called the septum within the limbic region. This area, when stimulated, produced feelings of strong euphoria. And these euphoric feelings were, super strong and sometimes enough to kind of overcome physical pain and depression.
I also like my last relationship.
Aw. You ever heard of something called transcranial magnetic stimulation?
Because
reason why I even brought this up is because I was listening to like a podcast. It was somebody with Joe Rogan had on where the guy was talking about antidepressants and how instead he went
instead of getting antidepressants, he gets like a treatment or something. And that's actually a good point to make. His research, as nefarious as it can seem, and some of it gets pretty dark, does have some good sort of,
as all this scientific research does.
As most technology does, right?
One could say that about the the horrible things that Mengele did. Like, yes, they were terrible, they were awful, they were completely beyond.
But because of that, we understand so much.
Yeah, exactly, dude. And it's just like, well, let's not waste all of that good freaking information.
Throwing out the baby with the bathwater.
Yeah, totally. That's how you always get scientists to do horrible things. I mean, do you think the people that were working on the Manhattan Project thought that? They were defending their country. They didn't think like, oh yeah, we're also gonna literally kill close to 1 million civilians, basically. Once all the numbers are tallied up. There's always gonna be a beneficial thing that can come out of things like this, and that's always how they sell new technology, right? Especially once the robot takeover happens, that's rather that's how it'll happen. Is they'll be like, whoa, we're going to make these androids that can pull people out of burning rubble and radioactive sites.
Oh, we're going to put smart speakers in your home that can turn off your lights.
Yeah. And also take all your data and all that shit or whatever. Yeah. Yeah, exactly, dude. And then before you know it, these freaking bipedal robots that are made of titanium or whatever are walking around your, neighborhoods.
You
with
clicked agree.
machine guns.
You clicked agree.
Why would you agree?
Why
to
would you
something
agree
if
to
you
something?
Didn't know what you were talking about. It didn't make any sense. So transcranial magnetic stimulation is just a non-invasive procedure that uses magnetic fields to stimulate nerve cells in the brain to improve symptoms of depression. And it's
Right.
typically used when other depression treatments don't work.
Right. And so my understanding was he left Yale and he was offered position back in Spain where he was from. That's kind of what he focused on. He stopped doing the invasive surgical implants and everything.
Where he made the chemitrode. That's what you were talking about.
Yes.
That's what you were talking about,
Yeah.
which is an implantable device that releases controlled amounts of drugs into specific areas of the brain.
Right.
DelGado also invented an early version of what is now a cardiac pacemaker. So like we were saying just a second ago, he did some good things.
Are we going to talk about the bull?
Of course.
Okay.
But first, a word from our sponsor. Face to face, we like to fucking eat. No, just kidding.
I have a wonderful opportunity about timeshares.
Make that 2 timeshares. Most famous example of the stemoceiver is the action occurred at the bull breeding ranch, Marcus. And DelGado, he famously stepped into the ring with the bull, which had the little stemoceiver gizmo implanted in the brain. Bull charged at him, and DelGado just presses the remote control, which caused the bull to just stop charging and just stop in its tracks.
And you can actually, they filmed this. You can actually go watch it.
And watch it.
It's pretty crazy.
I'll leave a link actually with some of the other videos. The region of the brain that DelGado stimulated when he pressed the handheld transmitter is the part of the brain involved in controlling voluntary movements. And DelGado claimed that the stimulus caused the bull to just lose all of his aggressive instincts. So, again, you could turn everything from emotions to actions on and off like a fucking light switch, dude.
Yeah, though I should point out that some people argued that maybe what he did was just basically kind of, for more or less, just do like a muscle spasm to just cause his muscles to just stop charging. But, if you watch the video, the bull's going right at him and then it just kind of turns.
Just straight stops.
Yeah.
Like what we were saying in super early on when I first mentioned Subproject 119, they're controlling like dogs to start or to walk, to stop, to turn different directions and stuff. So he could also, for example, stimulate a part of the brain and dilate the subject's pupils, like a shutter of like a camera. And he even, there's pictures of this too, he even constricted one and dilated the other.
Ugh.
So, like monkeys and stuff, it looked bizarre, Brody. And, anger, arousal, fear, sleep, all of these could be dialed
Dopey,
up or
sleepy,
down
bashful.
just as easily. Yeah. All of the dwarves were easily dialed up.
And another fuel to the conspiracy fire is that at one point his research was funded by the Air Force and the Office of Naval Research.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, obviously, why would they want to fund that if not to get some sort of like military benefit from that? And that kind of brings me to another point, like a super soldier.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
of course.
You could just, you don't want to give up, but you're really tired, and you just flick on a little switch or whatever, and all of a sudden your brain's like, you know what? I'm not even tired anymore. Like I can go fucking all night.
Or you know what? On second thought, I don't want to kill this guy.
Ooh,
And then, yes, you do.
Yeah, no kidding.
Make his trigger
Dude,
finger.
like in Haze, like what you were saying, that game that we were talking about before.
Pretty much.
Totally. Or that Black Mirror episode where all the soldiers are all geared up with all this new,
Future tech.
Apple glass, like head up display stuff.
Yeah.
And basically they think that they're seeing these like weird looking like vampire zombie things that are like attacking them. And really it's just like people going like, please, for the love of God, don't fucking kill me. You know what I mean? And then one of them fucking malfunctions and then it like opens his eyes to what's going on. Yeah, exactly. And so with all that in mind, does it make it kind of a little more probable or less eye-rolly when someone says like, mentions something about like a lone wolf shooter with, apparently like no motivation or ties or, you know what I mean? And then, I think just what we've learned so far, not even what we're going to be covering in a little bit, at least lends a little bit of credence to like, oh, I don't know, we should at least look into it. You know what I mean? Instead of just laughing it off in general and just being like, well, we shouldn't even look at that because that's not even possible. I'm going to end talking about surgical implants with a kind of a long quote from Mr. DelGado. And he said, quote, "We need a program of psychosurgery for political control of our society. The purpose is physical control of the mind. Everyone who deviates from the given norm can be surgically mutilated. The individual may think that the most important reality is his own existence, but this is only his personal point of view. This lacks historical perspective. Man does not have the right to develop his own mind. This kind of liberal orientation has great appeal. We must electronically control the brain. Someday armies and generals will be controlled by electronic stimulation of the brain. End quote.
Drop that mic.
That's not fucking terrifying. So, with that, we're going to segue into a kind of a slightly different section, but still mind control nonetheless. And we're going to be discussing a gentleman by the name of B.F. Skinner. And he's an American psychologist, behavioralist, author, inventor, social philosopher, lover,
Entrepreneur,
fighter,
father, friend.
Right? He kind of he's the type of person, he's the type of guy who considers free will to be a complete illusion and that human action is solely dependent on consequences of previous actions. So to strengthen behavior, which was like behavior was this whole, concept, Skinner used something he called operant conditioning. And he considered the rate of response to be the most effective measure of response strength. So to study operant conditioning, he invented the operant conditioning chamber, which is also called a Skinner box, which sounds way more terrifying than it actually is.
Wow. I just had two neurons connect in my brain.
Yeah.
I was like, who is this Skinner guy? And then you said Skinner box, and now it's coming
famous,
full circle.
yeah.
Okay.
And to measure the rate, he invented the cumulative recorder. Using these tools, he produced his most influential experimental work, which appeared in his book, Schedules of Reinforcement, which was in 1957. So basically, using reinforcement of like rewards or punishment to affect behavior in children, like recess or like, first choice of toy or, allowing them free association with friends. He was big into using his ability to control behavior through conditioning. The American school system was super interested in his work in order to get
obedient kids.
Obedient fucking kids, dude. Yes, exactly. Skinner also developed behavioral analysis, the philosophy of that science he called radical behavioralism, and founded a school of experimental research psychology, the experimental analysis of behavior. He imagined the application of these ideas and designed a human community in his utopian novel, Walden 2. Which, I didn't
was
like
a sequel to Walden 1.
Exactly, and they were both terrible. And whenever you make a sequel out of a terrible initial movie, it's a straight to DVD. Freaking $2.99 bargain bin at your local gas station.
It was also on the Sci-Fi Network.
Yeah, briefly. With all that, we've got all those bases kind of covered as far as the personal brainwashing is concerned. We got the psychological conditioning, we got the surgical implants, mental hypnosis, drugs, electroshock. But all of that, like I said, is kind of focused predominantly on like the personal aspect. And that, as we're going to find out here right now, is just the icing on the cake. The real power lies in the ability to control
the masses.
Entire communities, exactly. Mass mind control. And the people who practice that very thing call themselves gods. No, sorry. Social engineers.
Republicans.
Yeah, right. So social engineering, we kind of briefly talked about this last time, so we'll recap real quick. And we're not going to be discussing, like all the things that we could spiral off into a long rabbit hole of like the Frankfurt School, which is like a Marxist nihilist theory that everything is like a social construct that's all just based on power. We're also, unfortunately, not going to be talking about Laurel Canyon and like the American counterculture and engineering the music scene. And we're not going to be talking about the Tavistock Institute, which is like the British equivalent. Before we do that, I want to talk briefly about, Marcus, do you remember the Smith-Mundt Act?
Yes.
Do you remember basically what that was?
That was the one where they couldn't use propaganda on their own citizens.
Yes, and then that was developed in like 1948, and they repealed it. I want to say
under Obama.
Yeah, back in like 2008 or 9, and basically they just allowed the U.S. Department of State to practice what they call public diplomacy. So with that in mind, enter into your consciousness this gentleman, Edward Bernays,
Ah,
who was referred in his obituary as the father of public relations. And he was named one of the most 100 influential Americans of the 20th century by Life. Well, it's got to be Life magazine, actually. Never mind. I was going to say, how do you
Life
have
cereal?
all Life? All of Life,
all of
voted
life
and was
just
like, this
declared.
guy.
Even the
How do you
trees,
get on that?
the trees, the frogs, the amoebas.
Oh, they really rallied together. That's
Oh,
a
yeah.
whole voting block right there.
I mean, they outnumber us by like a trillion to one.
Trillion to one. This guy was important. He basically shaped what we see today in like the modern commercialism and the marketing scene. His best known campaigns included the 1929 effort to promote female smoking by branding cigarettes as
Freedom sticks.
torches of freedom, rather.
That's right. Torches
And
of
his
freedom.
work for the United Fruit Company, connected with the CIA orchestrated overthrow of the democratically elected Guatemalan government in 1954.
Unrelated.
As well as the whole reason why Americans have music rooms and bookshelves and why we eat eggs and bacon in the morning. All that shit, dude. This literally came from one guy. He worked for dozens of major American corporations, including Procter & Gamble and GE, and even government agencies, politicians, and nonprofit organizations. Most famously, I feel like it was Truman. He basically was trying to drum up support for the war, basically, for World War One. So this gentleman brought us such classics as Crystallizing Public Opinion in 1923.
Remember that one?
Remember? Propaganda in 1928, which again, he coined the word. Public Relations, 1945, which again, he invented the term. And The Engineering of Consent in 1955.
What a great title.
So fantastic. So this guy was a
Also
big
like my
fan
last
of
relationship.
People like, go easy on yourself. Yeah, bro. So Bernays was a huge fan of people like this guy named Walter Lippmann, who was like a leading public figure at the time, a leading intellectual, actually, who wrote Public Opinion in 1921, dropping the line, quote, "The manufacturing of consent is a revolution in the practice of democracy," which is hilarious.
God.
He believed that, quote, "the common interest very largely eludes the public's opinion and must be managed as a specialized class," meaning, end quote, meaning you can't handle the truth. You can't handle the truth. That the general public is just too fucking stupid, basically. He referred to them as, quote, "the bewildered herd," and, quote, "ignorant and meddlesome outsiders." Ignorant and meddlesome
Outsiders.
Right.
Outsiders
and
of what?
meddlesome? I'm sorry. I thought I had domain over my destiny, you son of a bitch. Like, yeah, some of these guys, and dude, this isn't like the 20s and 30s.
Yeah.
He was also big fans, or he would have been a big fan, rather, of B.F. Skinner, who's, like I said earlier, the behavioral sociologist that believed human beings are merely responding to like the external stimuli and could therefore, be controlled. All these guys kind of stem from the belief that human beings aren't really, as at least in the masses, aren't really in control of their own destiny. Not only aren't in control, shouldn't be in control.
Yeah.
Really the levers of control should lie in our hands, really. So this next guy was a lot like Edward Bernays. He's like the 21st century version of Bernays. Future Bernays. And this guy's name is Cass Sunstein. We're not really going to talk about him too long, but I just thought it was important to put this in here. This is a guy who was famous for something called the nudge theory. Nudge.
Just need a little push.
Love that scene. Nudge is like a concept in behavioral science, political theory, and behavioral economics, which proposes like positive reinforcement and indirect suggestions as ways to influence the behavior and decision making of groups or individuals. So B.F. Skinner's behavioral conditioning on a larger scale with like set to like an economic tune. He's an American legal scholar, particularly in the field of constitutional law. So he knows how to, twist it.
Great.
Administrative law, environmental law, and law and behavioral economics. And he was also the administrator of the White House Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs during the Obama administration.
So all of the things that we don't want people to make up their own minds about.
Yeah, exactly, dude. I'm gonna like hyper focus on all these things that I can use to basically control, because we're supposed to be like a republic, right? Like, but we have like a document, yeah. And so, but if we can interpret that document the way we want it to, using psychology and the nudge theory and all this nonsense, then obviously we'll get our agenda through. So that's like the economic side. Enter this guy, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino. He's a military intelligence officer and psychological operations specialist with a PhD in political science. So I guess he's Dr. Lieutenant Colonel. Doc Lieutenant.
Dr. Lieutenant Colonel, MD, PhD.
Right? Long ass name. He's a member of the Armored Cavalry, or was a member of the Armored Cavalry Division and 82nd Airborne at Fort Bragg until he moved into Special Operations in 1969 and was sent to Vietnam for a year, where it is rumored that he took part in Operation Phoenix, which was just like a top secret military operation run by the CIA, using like a combination of psychological operations with like special forces soldiers to, kidnap and torture and assassinate civilian communists, that in an effort to destroy the Viet Cong's like infrastructure. They were like a straight terror like group. They wouldn't. They were like off the grid. We're not gonna play by the same rules.
Sounds great.
Kidnap people, torture people, effed up shit. Yeah. So in 1984, Aquino was being investigated by the military concerning allegations of pedophilia surrounding a daycare center at the Presidio of San Francisco.
Oh.
When it was still a U.S. Army outpost. But no charges were brought against him, and who was an open member of Anton LaVey's Church of Satan, until later when he split off with his other kind of dissatisfied members and founded the Temple of Set, after the Egyptian god of like storms, war, and chaos.
So he went from Satan to Egyptian gods.
Yes, totally. Well, according to Aquino, basically this religion is where Satan has revealed his true name, and that to be of the deity Set. And so
he's like Martin Luther, but of the Church of Satan.
Exactly. You're not being Satan-y enough. I'm starting my own weird Satan group. Who's bloody with me? I'll join you, Michael. Right? Yeah, fuck this place. He went on to retire after serving in a stint in the Space Command, where he held a top secret clearance.
What?
Yes.
I've been everywhere, man.
Right, no kidding. Which is funny because all this happened during his time in the military, right? And all this time he was like an open Satanist. So it's like, it makes me wonder, did he like make the military recognize like religious holidays that they just presumably made up? Like, today is lamb killing day. I can't come into work. What? Yes, it's very important. It's very, very important. You guys have to be very tolerant, and I'm taking a religious day off. It's in the handbook. So this guy is the author of such literary classics as the Satanic Bible and the Temple of Set, Part 1 and 2. As well as another book that's super interesting, and this is kind of the point of why I brought this gentleman up, is called Mind War, which started out simply enough as an internal U.S. Army concept paper intended only for the eyes of the government policymakers that accidentally became public. Whoopsie daisy! The premises is that, quote, war is endemic to the human disposition and therefore proposes to eliminate killing and the destruction by replacing it with a far more powerful kind of war, one which focuses on the human mind both individually and collectively. Devised to save humanity, it could also supersede it. End quote. Yeah, so that's kind of bizarre. I don't know what, is far more powerful than killing and destruction. So I guess this guy's saying that the old way of like warfare, as far as bullets and bombs and tanks and all that shit, is fucking analog, homie. That's out that's like hopping in a jalopy. Like, and people are like looking at you funny.
We need to do that Cartman versus the psychics battle.
Oh my, what's happening? How funny is it the guy tries to do it on the cops and they just fucking gun him down? Just fucking kill him. You're like, Jesus Christ. So in the book, it outlines the logistics necessary for, quote, laboratory implementation, end quote, through structural redesign of the U.S. Army's 3 special operations branches, which are psychological operations, special forces, and civil affairs. Reminds me of something called Operation JADE HELM 15. Do you remember hearing about that at all back in 2015, Marcus?
Jade Helm.
It got blown up, I think, by a bunch of I know Alex Jones here, taking it deep into the heart of Texas. He was talking about it a lot, saying that it's a fucking government takeover. They're coming for our guns. Fucking this, that, and the other thing. He actually wasn't. It's one of the things.
Wasn't too
close,
far off the mark.
Way off. This was basically the joint exercise in a realistic military training with over 12,000 troops, and was sponsored by the United States Special Operations Command, or SOCOM, and involved everybody. The United States Army Special Operations,
1 million troops,
joint Special Operation Commands, which is like Green Beret, Navy SEALs, all those guys, along with other U.S. military units in multiple states, including Texas, Arizona, Florida, Louisiana, Mississippi, New Mexico, Utah.
This is like a war game, some kind of practice operation. What is this?
Yes. So, dude, its stated purpose was to, quote, improve the Special Operation Forces capability as part of the national security strategy, end quote. So troops engaging in the exercise assume the roles of either occupying or resistance forces, the red versus blue. Yeah.
Okay, so they're
war games.
They're showing up for practice.
Yes, but super
shirts versus skins,
super intricately.
Oh, no fair! You guys had F-16s.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, you got Tommy? Damn it, guys! They got Tommy. It's over. He's so fast.
All right. Everybody target Tommy. Take him out.
Take out the legs. Yeah, exactly. Sweep the leg. Yes, Sensei. Some participants wore civilian attire and drove civilian vehicles.
Oh, great. That's a good look.
I do.
That's a good look.
You know that these people are like military. So basically the point, I think, was to use social media and surveillance technology on the ground to integrate with military operations for a foreign or domestic urban battlefield situation. So if they wanted to drop off somewhere into a neighborhood or whatever to do whatever, whether it's in America or another freaking country, whether you have to lock the neighborhood down or you're coming to pick somebody up and extract them or whatever, forcibly or maybe not forcibly, maybe they want you to come get them, whatever the thing is, you need intelligence on the ground, right?
Sure.
So you need people there, you need information there. Well, what's already there? Social media.
Yeah.
So using the internet, using social media, using satellite, using freaking telecom, using freaking boots on the ground, integrating all of that with undercover guys, regular military guys, Navy SEALs, and basically trying to use all of that to gain the best advantage or whatever, because this is the new battlefield,
right?
The digital,
makes sense.
The digital battlefield
makes sense.
So journalists were not allowed to be embedded into the operation, and because of this, all the conspiracy theories grew.
Exactly. It's the same thing we talked about earlier with the Bilderberg Group.
Exactly. If you can't give people some kind of an answer, they're going to fill it with whatever. And that's
in the Secret Societies episode.
Crazy. Yeah. And which one was that? Number
Secret Societies.
6, 5.
Maybe?
The time we had a guest.
A special guest.
He did a very good job. So, for instance, some of these wacky theories kind of believe that Jade Helm was a psychological operation aimed at getting people acclimated to seeing the military in force on the streets so that they could gradually accept some kind of tyrannical police state.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I labeled it the first one. Some believe that it was also an international operation aimed to seize citizens' guns in an anticipation for a tyrannical police state crackdown. Because if you wanted to, why would you need to be able to have these undercover, soldiers, and why do you need all their
social media?
Thank you. Or even recently, closed Walmarts used by the military to intern sovereign citizens or political dissidents that wouldn't go along with martial law. That was also another, big scare. It's why are all these empty Walmarts, popping up all over the place? I remember that was a big, thing on YouTube for a minute.
Huh.
What are they using all these empty Walmarts for? It would be a good place to store a bunch of people. Which I don't even know if that would be a...
Yeah, you're losing me over here.
Well, it's like I said, those are some of the
lost in the weeds here.
Theories.
Yeah.
Sorry. So anyway, why does all this stuff that we just talked about, why does it matter? You know what I mean? Why do these guys that I talked about matter? All the bases of society are kind of covered, right? They have education.
Where are you going with this, Drew?
Psychology, military, finance, corporate. Well, it matters because someone out there actually objectively quantified all of it. like straight up mathematically.
Okay.
So enter this term called cybernetics. How'd you look up this a little bit here, Marcus? So I thought cybernetics was like robot.
An advanced cybernetic organism
Well done.
with detailed files on human anatomy.
I know now why you cry.
Oh.
It's because I'm depressed. So I thought cybernetics were like implants or some way to integrate human beings with machines, which I guess it technically colloquially is that.
Right.
But where the term comes from is this guy named Norbert Wiener. So, I know, low hanging fruit. I apologize. You guys deserve better than this here on Face to Face.
Well, for only $1 a month.
We can edit out all the bullshit.
The re-release of the redo of episode 1.
With better graphics and dewbacks walking in the background. So this guy was an MIT mathematics professor, and he basically coined the term cybernetics, which just apparently is derived from the Greek word kybernetes, which just means the steersman.
Cool.
Yeah, right? And so this guy earned his PhD from Harvard at the age of 17. And he studied under Lord Bertram Russell. Call back from the first episode and from earlier.
Callback.
So the name of the book that he wrote was called Cybernetics: Control and Communication in the Animal and the Machine, back in 1948. Underwritten by the Rockefeller Foundation. No big deal. So he also wrote The Human Use of Human Beings, Cybernetics and Society. And that was in 1950.
The human use of human beings?
Yeah, right.
Interesting.
How is that not like terrifying?
How to cook for humans. How to cook 40 humans. How to cook for 40 humans.
But now I'm too sad. So he and several other like-minded scientists formed the first official Macy's conference in 1946, which, with a name like Macy's Conference, it's like so unassuming. When I first heard about this, I'm like, what was this guy? This guy was into like shopping and like,
he's a fashion guru.
Wonderful like blouses made of silk for
something about big balloons.
Yeah, exactly. But as it so happens, just a few months before the passage of the National Mental Health Act, which gave the federal government a new mandate just how to treat and to prevent mental illness, as well as establishing the National Institute of Mental Health. So these guys just kind of created this Macy's conference at the coincidentally the exact same time as the National Institute of Mental Health. Their first handful of meetings were actually not about shopping, and was entitled Circular, Causal, and Feedback Mechanisms in Biological and Social Systems, which sounds fascinating. If I could comprehend the shit that is in that book, I would totally, and if I didn't suck wells at reading, I would totally read that book. Again, if Hugo Weaving or one of those guys put it onto audio file, I could totally read it. Probably. So these 2-day conferences are held in the Upper East Side of Manhattan, just down the street from Cornell University, by the way, which we're talking about all that MK Ultra nonsense. And it would combine the innovators of the innovators of the physical and biological sciences with those of the physiological and social sciences. So they're going to fuse the two together in order to
control the world,
comprehensively study man and control the world. Exactly. And they, of course, would invite guests, to speak or just to hang out and hear what they have to say, including government assets from the departments like, the CIA, the OSS, including a guy named Alan Turing. Remember him? Created the Turing test. As well as other things. So he was into like
robotics.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And AI and algorithms and the such. As well as this gentleman named Neumann, who is the guy who created binary code. So a lot of people that went to this conference ended up, like if I had to kind of mention some of the things that they ended up becoming famous for later, you'd be like, oh my God, that makes sense.
Yeah.
These guys meet regularly and discuss amongst themselves how to further, tighten their grasp on the mind of the bewildered herd. And
what was that phrase used earlier? The
outsiders.
Yeah, meddlesome outsiders.
Which is hilarious. You're just like, dude, arrogant fuck. Like, go fuck yourself, dude. How'd you like to get a metal knuckle sandwich over here? What to take away from all of this scary and maybe a little bit depressing knowledge, I guess, is always keep an eye out for fuckery. You know what I mean? Because our whole Western society is pretty much based on it in its many forms. In its many forms. You know, like whether you're online or, you know, the election's coming up pretty soon, they have tons of campaign ads that are just saturated with this type of shit, or even when you're in the goddamn grocery store, dude, you know what I mean? You're just being bombarded with this type of mental manipulation. You just keep an eye out for it, stay vigilant.
Yeah, all those different types of appeals that you mentioned the first time.
Yeah, you know, well, like I said, our whole marketing system's based on it. Like, dude, in a country where we have this awesome freedom to make our day-to-day decisions, it comes with like a price, you know what I mean? And other people are trying to make those decisions for you, you know what I mean? Whether it's from, and it's top down, dude, whether it's the politicians and political leaders that they want our vote or whatever, or you know, our trust and security and stuff, all the way down to what fucking toothpaste we're supposed to buy, you know what I mean? And you know, simple as like a commercial advertising. That's the takeaway from this, I guess, is if you're living in a dope country like America, we have all this freedom. The price is eternal vigilance.
I had something I wanted to say,
Please.
and I really meant to put it in with DelGado, but I think the reason that this is a particularly unsettling topic to a lot of people, the idea of free will is so strong, and if somebody were to suggest to you, well, you don't really have free will, even if you do, that free will can be easily taken away from you. And the choices that you have and the personality that you have and the feelings that you have is all just chemicals in your brain and things that we can manipulate so easily. And we can change who you are, who you think you are.
What is real?
Yeah.
How would you define real? If real is merely the electrical and chemical impulses interpreted by your brain, something else, Morpheus.
etc.,
But
Morpheus.
no, you're totally right though. Especially in America, where we value freedom so highly, and what is freedom is the exercise of your will, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean,
True.
Up to a point.
Yeah, you know,
up to the other guy's
I'll buy
nose,
that.
I guess is
Yeah.
the old saying. That's why I feel like we're ground zero for that kind of targeted study and manipulation. Like
America.
yes,
Yeah.
George Carlin said it best, I think, dude, when he said, when you're born in this world, you're given a ticket to the freak show, and when you're born in America, you get a front row seat. And I totally agree with that, dude. So I guess that's a good place to leave it. Thank you, folks, for fucking hanging in there with us. It's a lot of good information, but I think it's really important. Apply it to your life, and or not. But either way, if you like this episode, I really appreciate it if you jam over and give us like a little 5-star review, or maybe a little comment or a like.
And go be one of those meddling outsiders.
That's right. Never be afraid to freaking flex your bewildered herd muscle, because you know what? What did Hopper say?
Hopper from Bug's Life?
Yes. Those puny ants outnumber us 100 to 1. And as soon as they figure that out, there goes our way of life. It isn't about food. It's about keeping those ants in line.
It's amazing what you'll find face to face.
So, bye.
Dear listener, would you like to hear more content like this, but better produced and streamlined to fit comfortably betwixt your eager ear holes? Your contributions and tips through Patreon and PayPal will go directly into the show in order to grow this podcast. Each dollar is greatly, greatly appreciated. Don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment suggesting topics you'd like to hear in future episodes. Thank you for listening, and visit the channel again soon for another serving of satisfying topics for your curious mind with Phase to Phase.